Greetings, I'm Professor Hobo, and welcome to another HOBOTECH News product review. For as long as the professor has been around, at least in YouTube terms, there's been an outcry of folks that demanded large inverters in tiny little boxes that they can take camping or on job sites and literally run anything. The original ECOFLOW Delta from ages past sold so well because it was exactly that. But it had a low cycle battery, no app, kind of lame solar support, and was still limited to 1800 watts, which isn't the full 20 amps you get from a typical household outlet. Well, it only took something like 4 years of crying and bitching about it, but you finally got it. It's called the BigBlue Cellpowa 2500. But is it any good? Let's find out. HOBOTECH. And no, I didn't say that wrong. This thing's actually called Cellpowa. And I'm not kidding. It says it right on the back. Now, these guys obviously have a pretty good sense of humor. You can't even say it without making fun of it. So let's all try it now. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Cellpowa! So what's inside the Cellpowa? It's a 1843 watt-hour lithium iron phosphate battery rated at the usual 3500 cycles to 80%. As for the size, I'll go ahead and put that at the bottom of the screen, and here's what it weighed on my scale. As for build quality, it is all ABS plastic all the way around. There's no metal here. It does have rubberized feet on the bottom. Now, this design is obviously a copycat of the BlueTti AC200 series. It does have a color touchscreen and power on and off button on the front, but that is it. There's nothing else on the front, and that's where the similarities end. BigBlue's design has all the AC inputs and outputs on one side and all the DC inputs and outputs on the other side. As for what the Cellpowa is packed inside, a 2500 watt pure sine inverter with a 5000 watt surge with a whopping 6, count them, 20 amp outlets. As for the solar charging, this supports from 12 to 65 volts via MPPT controller up to 25 amps or 1200 watts through 3, yes, count them, 3 8mm ports, otherwise known as 7909 barrel plugs. But don't worry though, they do include MC4 adapters, so you can use any third-party solar panel you like. As for ways to charge, there are 3. First, of course, is from AC wall outlet. Now, there is no power brick. The charger's built into this unit, so all you need is this very common cable to charge it from AC wall outlet. Now, AC charging is at 1200 watts, and it takes about 2.5 hours to charge it from 0 to 100%. Now, the manual and all their advertising promotes 1.5 hours to charge up to 80%, because of course the last 20% takes the longest. Now, as for the second way to charge is from 12 or 24 volt vehicle. They do include this adapter. Now, it takes about 18 hours to charge from dead to full using this. The manual states, of course, 12 to 14 hours to 80%. And of course, the third way to charge is through solar, and this supports up to 1200 watts of solar. If you max that out, it'll charge in only 2.5 hours from 0 to full. The manual, of course, states 1.5 hours to 80% using 6 of their 200 watt solar panels. And of course, to charge with solar, it does come with an included cable which allows you to convert MC4 to 8mm, because their solar panels are MC4 connectors, but the solar generator has an 8mm input. So of course, they include a cable for that. But wait, there's more, because they also include another cable and another cable. And then if you need parallel adapters, guess what? They include all these as well. So you won't be short of any cables. You'll be able to hook up 1200 watts of their solar panels with all these included cables. Now, as for 12 volt output types, it does sport a single 12 volt cigarette lighter input, good for 10 amps, and a pair of 5521 outputs, also rated at 5 amps each. As for USB outputs, there are aplenty, 6 in total in fact. It does sport a pair of USB quick charge ports rated at 18 watts each, a pair of USB-C power delivery outputs rated at 45 watts each, and a pair of USB-C power delivery outputs rated at 100 watts each. Note that there are no bidirectional USB ports on this. You cannot charge the unit via USB. This also does not have any wireless charging pads or any wireless charging capability whatsoever. The Cellpowa does offer a built-in basic UPS feature. You just turn the inverter on, and while the unit's plugged into AC power, it'll pass through that power to the AC outlets on the side. And when the power goes out, the UPS relay will trip, and the outlets are then powered by the internal battery. This unit does feature an app allowing you to remotely control the device. The app itself isn't really ready for prime time yet, so I won't demo that today, but it should be ready in a few weeks. It also has something I find very interesting. Apparently it has a built-in intercom system to call for help. When activated by pressing a walkie-talkie icon, it will scan for a local civil radio frequency and automatically send out an SOS.
Sending out an SOS. Sending out an SOS.
You can then talk to the person on the other side through the built-in microphone and speaker located right here. Now, I don't see this feature anywhere on my prototype unit, but it is mentioned in the manual. And I can imagine how many folks are going to accidentally activate this feature and be greeted by the local rangers.
What are you, some kind of nut? Who do you think you are? Dun, dun, dun!
Now, you're probably wondering, how are the rangers going to know where you're at? Well, of course, interestingly, this has a built-in GPS receiver, so BigBlue knows where you are at all times. Now, it's currently not working on my prototype. We have to hope this is something that can be disabled in the final version. BigBlue does offer an 18-month limited warranty. And of course, we took the Cellpowa into my secret laboratory here, where we performed all kinds of crazy experiments on it, including, are you guys ready for it? A double-fisted bang, bang, battery capacity test. The results, the DC capacity test, this unit scored 1,377 watt hours out of 1,843, or 75%. The results of the AC capacity test, the results were marginally better at 1,410 watt hours out of 1,843, or 77%. Pure sine wave check under load. Let's go ahead and put the Cellpowa under load and see what the sine wave looks like. Looks good at 118 volts, 60 hertz, and that's under a 1,600 watt load. Inverter capacity test. Now on this test, we're going to go ahead and push the inverter to its limit and see exactly what can it handle. Now this has a 2,500 watt pure sine wave inverter, and it's going to take some pretty hefty output in order to max it out. So of course, we're going to have to use the solar degenerator. Unfortunately, it's going to be very difficult to see because the output watts are this tiny little number down in the corner. Okay, we're at 2,500 watts, which is the capacity of the inverter. So the voltage has dropped slightly to 112 volts, but the sine wave still looks good. And that's it. I can't push it any harder with the solar degenerator. All right, let's try this again. I have a hairdryer on the floor set on low, so as soon as I kick this on, 2,500 watts. Okay, it is not exceeding 2,500 watts. In fact, what it is doing is it is lowering the voltage. You can see that we're down to 100 volts now. I am maxed on the solar degenerator. Now the sine wave still looks good, but we're down to 98 volts. Now I have to assume that this behavior is intentional because it's happening right at the 2,500 watt inverter limit. So basically it's doing an ECOFLOW, which is what I call this. ECOFLOW was the first brand that I'm aware of that would allow you to run higher wattage appliances than you were supposed to, because what they would do is they would lower the voltage as you increase the wattage. So basically, it allows more amps at a lower volts. The problem with this design is that a lot of things don't like lower voltage. If you try to plug an induction stove on this past the 2,500 watt mark, the induction stove would quit working, freak out, the display would probably flash and do crazy things, or it might not cook at all. Same thing with a microwave. If you were running this at its 2,500 watt limit, so you had multiple appliances plugged in, and you turn on a microwave, now the microwave, as soon as it tried to pull the watts that it needs to run properly, it would freak out. It would probably just not work, not shut down. I've actually seen turntables go like this inside the microwave and the lights fade and stuff. This is fine up to 2,500 watts, but as soon as you try to exceed it, this just lowers the voltage, and I didn't see any setting in here which allows you to turn this off. So I'm guessing this is a forced feature of this inverter. Now, for most of you, you're never going to push this to 2,500 watts or beyond anyway, because most of the power you get from your wall outlet at home is never going to exceed 2,000, 2,200 watts on any single appliance. Now, of course, you can easily hit this if you're doing like I'm doing and running hair dryers and heaters and stuff all at the same time. Next is the 5-minute sustained cooling test, where we will run the inverter at its 2,500 watt peak for at least 5 minutes to make sure there's no cooling or overheating issues. Go Gadget Cellpowa. Okay, we're at 2,500 watts. This says 118 volts, so we're right at the capacity inverter.
Well, looky what we have here.
2,500 watts. We were just at the 4.5 minute mark, and the inverter shut down with an error. So the error is inverter output overload prof. Oh, it just came back on by itself. So that's a little bit odd. It shuts down with an overload, but then the inverter just kicks back on again in like 30 seconds. So that's kind of a failure, but it also, since it kicked back on, it kind of passed. Maybe I'll try like 2,400 watts. That should make it the 5 minutes. So let's try that. 2,400 watts, let's start the timer. While we're waiting for this test to complete, let's go ahead and check the output temperature of the fans. 95 degrees, not bad. Okay, we're back and we made it the full 5 minutes at 2,400 watts. Okay, we're about a meter away. Let's see what the noise level is with the inverter fans on maximum. 66 decibels. Yeah, it is kind of loud.
I'm afraid you're just too darn loud. Next, please.
This next test is the max charge rate test, where we determine how much power can we put into the power. So I have a 48 volt, 37 amp power supply over here, which should be absolutely perfect for this, because this can take from 12 to 65 volts, 25 amps. That's a lot of amps for an 8mm barrel plug. Let's go ahead and kick on this power supply and see what we get charge-wise. It's very, very slowly taking the power from this. 2 amps, 3 amps. All right, we're up to 400 watts input. Of course, it's still going. Okay, it's been about a minute. This thing is taking its sweet old time. And interestingly enough, it started over again. I don't understand why it's rejecting this 50 volts and keeps restarting. All right, fast forward about a half an hour. I got all the cables and everything switched over from the other power supply to this one. This is my variable voltage. Now, this can't put out very many amps, but it can do variable voltage up to about 50 volts. You can see I have 14.4 volts going in, and it is accepting the input. It takes its sweet old time. Well, it was going up to 140 watts, then it restarted. It's doing the same thing as it did with the other power supply. Now, it thinks the solar panel's hooked up, which it shouldn't, because it's only 14 volts. Oh, it reset again. At this point, I'm finding it hard to believe that 2 completely different power supplies from 2 completely different companies that I bought years apart are causing the exact same thing to happen on this. As soon as it gets too close to its maximum input for that voltage, it just cancels it and restarts. And it just does this all day long. I consider it'll just keep restarting. You hear the fans kicking on and off. It'll get up to 85 watts and then it will just die and come back up to 85 watts and just die. Let's try this. This can do 48 volts at 20 amps, which will get us close to 800, 900 watts if it works. So let's rewire it again to the other one, and we'll try that one and see if that one has any luck. All right, cable switched over again. I have it doing some fake solar into the BigBlue. It's running at 51 volts. Let's see what happens. Here we're getting up to 600 watts. Now with the other power supply, as soon as it got to about 800 watts, it would reset. Did it again. This time when it got to 900 watts, it reset. Now you notice it resets and it comes up with what looks like a solar panel. So it's basically kicking in MPPT. So we give it another try, let it go ahead and kick in MPPT, because it should think at 51 volts that this is a solar panel. It just reset again. I've never had this happen with a power station in my 3 years of doing this. 3 separate power supplies, 3 different voltages, 3 different amps. This time, whatever they have set up in the BigBlue, it's not liking steady constant voltage and steady constant amps. It's looking for a solar panel. The issue is here, it's 11 o'clock at night. I do most of my testing and everything at night. So I guess tomorrow we're gonna drag this thing out in the dirt and we're gonna plug the solar panel into it and see, can it at least charge from a solar panel without freaking out? So fast forward to tomorrow, we'll do a solar panel test. These are the crappy sky conditions we have today for this test, which is why I hate doing actual solar panel testing, because you never know what the weather's going to be like. Okay, we have the BigBlue 200 watt solar panel hooked up. I just have one hooked up. Let's see what kind of wattage we're getting. Of course, it was 200 watts 30 seconds before I grabbed the camera. So here comes the sun again. Unfortunately, that's all I can show you because the sky conditions are so bad right now. When I first hooked this up, it did say 200 watts. And here's something else I found funny. They call it the Solarpowa 200. Now here's something I'm definitely finding annoying. The fact is that the fan runs on this all the time. If you have it turned on, the fans are running. I don't have anything plugged in. I'm not charging it. I don't have the AC or DC inverter on. The fans are just running to run. Now you can see that's only 45 decibels, so it's not loud. The fans have no reason to run whatsoever. There's nothing to cool. So maybe it's a prototype thing, but BigBlue, you definitely need to do something about these fans. Not only are they excessively loud, but they're running way too much. DC output rate check. We are plugged into the cigarette lighter socket and we're able to pull 10 amps, no problem. Now what about simultaneous charging? This does have 2 inputs. It does have the AC input, which plugs into the wall or generator. And then you have the 8mm inputs, which plug into solar or 12 volt. We're charging from the wall right now at just over 1,000 watts. Let's go ahead and kick on my charger here, which will feed 50 volts into the 8mm. You can see we're up to 1,200 watts and climbing. Now let's see if it resets like it did before. Once it gets to a certain wattage. Yep, it reset. Actually, it reset everything. It reset the charging from the wall as well. That's really strange. Well, it looks like I found a bug with the prototype. It actually resets everything when you plug in the charger. So just assume that this is 12 or 24 volts from your vehicle. I'm going to have to guess that it would do the same thing, that it would just reset it, because we tried 14.4 volts and it did the same thing. It got to 80 watts, 90 watts, and it would just reset. Now it's doing it with solar, it's doing it at 14 volts, and these are good chargers. They're not like they're junk and it's causing a problem. But now, when it does that reset, it stops charging from the wall too. Now, there's no reason it should stop charging from the wall. I have the inverters turned off. It's at 62%. It should absolutely be charging from the wall at the same time. So, looks like I found a bug, BigBlue. Something you're gonna have to correct in the final product. Now, the BigBlue does have a built-in UPS feature. So it has a UPS relay inside, which means as long as you have the inverter on, power gets sent to the plugs on the side, which powers your load. In this case, I have this heater turned on. Some of you have already seen this before. If you're a subscriber to the channel, I use this heater because it has a little red light on it, which you can clearly see. So right now, it's being powered from the battery inside the BigBlue. So nothing special. What I'm gonna do now is plug in the AC wall power into the BigBlue, and then it should automatically start powering this heater. So not only is it powering the heater, but it's also charging the battery. So it's pretending that the power just came back on after you ran the battery down some. So let's go ahead and unplug it and watch this light and see how fast it blinks. As soon as I unplug this from the wall, it should be pretty instantaneous, but let's see. Okay, so watch this light as I unplug the main power. That's pretty instantaneous. Okay, so let's try it again. I darkened it a little bit so it's easier to see the light. Let's go ahead and unplug it. 3, 2, 1. That instantaneous switchover makes the BigBlue one of the best power stations out there with a UPS feature. That means you can put sensitive equipment like computers or whatever on this, and if the power goes out, the switchover is practically instantaneous. So what about USB power delivery? Does this actually output 2 times 100 watts? Well, I have 2 power bends hooked up, which can each take 100 watts from power delivery, and look at the results. Currently charging at 168 watts. That's only because one of the power bends is almost full. The musician's favorite test, the amp interference test. I have this small keyboard amp plugged into the inverter. All the knobs turned up all the way, nothing plugged into the amp itself. When I turn on the AC inverter, let's find out if it makes noise. I haven't done this yet. This will be the first time. So place your bets. Do you think this is going to be a clean inverter or a noisy inverter after what you've seen so far? All right, here we go. All right, and here's your result. It's very quiet, very clean power coming out of the Cellpowa. So not only can the Cellpowa power your refrigerator, it can power your amp too. Hey, I'm from Brooklyn. So what do I like about the Cellpowa 2500? Well, besides its funny ass name, there's actually a lot to like here. I think this is a great size and weight with all the major features that everyone wants. Finally, there is a small portable generator with a large inverter capable of 20 amps without any kind of induced trickery. The original EcoFlow Delta was impressive like this because it had a large 1800 watt inverter with a tiny little battery, which made it one-hand portable. Of course, this was eons ago and no one wants those 800 cycle batteries nowadays, and if it doesn't have an app, it gets totally ignored. Oh, how times have changed. Now, the big difference here is that the Cellpowa can literally start up anything you can plug into a household wall outlet, be it an 1800 watt microwave or even a shop drill press. With 1400 watt hours of usable battery in a package most can carry around pretty easily, I want to see more of this kind of thing on the market. Now, what else I like is this has a crazy amount of outputs on it. I mean, come on, it has 6 AC outlets on one side, 4 USB-C, a pair of quick charges, triple 12 volts. You'll pretty much want for nothing. It also has a very good, almost instantaneous UPS, even if it does take a full 10 seconds for the inverter to kick on. 1200 watts of solar input at this size is practically class leading. Although, what's up with all these power stations lately that can support tons of solar but limited to 65 volts? So you're required to run like bucketfuls of adapters and stuff like that just to hook up a bunch of solar panels. Is 65 volts some magic number in the universe that can't be broken like the speed of light? I mean, I have 3 Victron controllers for my home solar that can take 250 volts all day long. So what's up with that, Cellpowa? So what don't I like about the Cellpowa 2500? Well, it has to be the way that these triple 8mm inputs work with the MPPT controller and the way it acts. It seems to work all right with a solar panel, but it doesn't charge right with 12 or 24 volts or even 48 volts from an expensive power supply, and it absolutely should. This is the first time I've ever ran into this with any solar generator. So there definitely has to be a bug here because when simultaneously charging this from both wall and solar input, it resets both and then cancels the wall charging. This is a prototype, and let's hope this is just a bug that BigBlue will fix on the list for the release. Now that brings me to something else I don't like, the fact that this inverter hard limits to 2500 watts by dropping the voltage. Yes, this is a feature made famous by EcoFlow that everyone else is now copying, but there's no way, at least on my prototype, to disable it. BigBlue needs to make it possible to turn this off or risk damaging certain appliances that can't handle low voltage like microwaves and air conditioners. We also need to add a way to disable that GPS locator because I don't know about you, but I don't want my location being tracked. Of course, there are other features that are missing or broken on my prototype. BigBlue knows they have several months before delivery to customers and will no doubt have these features working. It sure would have been nice though to have a working beta model instead of this late alpha. It's not like this is their first crowdfunding campaign. I think maybe they're used to quote unquote other reviewers that just plug in a solar panel on a laptop and call that testing. I don't know, what do you guys think? Maybe I should stop doing these 30-minute videos and just do these like 5-minute reviews like everyone else, where they just throw in some fancy camera angles and use that silly computer-generated hiccup music. I wonder. How do you like my man bun? Check it out, man. It's a cell power and it's got a solar panel. And it can power a laptop and make coffee. Yeah, man, I got puss. Product price, and this is where things get good. The BigBlue Cellpowa 2500 is currently kickstarting as of today, April 19th, starting at 9 a.m. Pacific time. That's when the campaign goes live, for the insane crackhead price of only $9.99 for the first 300 sold. This makes it the most inverter you can get for your dollar today, and at only 54 cents per watt hour at that. Of course, this price is for a limited time. Once those first 300 units are sold, the price is gonna go up. As for competition, the closest match is of course gonna be the BLUETTI AC200P. Now there are several others like the Super Base Pro, the LiFePO4, the Pecron 2 kilowatt, and they're all in that same range, but none of them offer a 2500 watt inverter or nearly as many USB ports. So who is this aimed at? Well, this is going to the middle market that wants to run a few home appliances during a blackout, be able to cook with electric. It's also a great size for RV use or powering a fridge on a road trip. These are basically jack of all trades. Although you won't be backpacking with it, it's still very portable and just powerful enough to run about any 110 volt appliances, including well pumps, air conditioners, washing machines, and furnaces. As for recommended solar, BigBlue is recommended you get the Cellpowa with 6 of their 200 watt Solapowa solar panels, and that will max this thing out. Now, I am going to recommend this myself unless you already have other solar panels. Just be aware this is a low voltage, high amp setup, and in order to max out that 1200 watts, you're going to have to put a lot of solar panels in parallel, which means a lot of Y adapters and things like that, which fortunately this comes with. Now, if you're interested in the Cellpowa 2500, there is a link below in the description of this video. I'm also going to put a link here at the bottom of the screen that you can type in manually. There's also going to be a QR code that you can scan here on your mobile device. It'll take you directly to their campaign page. Thanks for watching. If you learned something today, don't forget to give me that thumbs up below. And if you're not a subscriber already, you know what to do. That's it for now. Till next time.
Odin commands you to like and subscribe. And clean my litter box.
And yes, I just put a 20 amp glass fuse in my power supply so I can use it for this review. If you're curious what brand fuses I use, it's OBGTFAK, ObjectFAK. Yeah, high quality stuff. I mean, absolutely zero effort to come up with a name, just zero effort. I think they literally use a Chinese random brand name generator. I literally think that's what they do. How do you like my man bun?
RV Golf Guy, Andrew Von Rupp, Brian Luters, John Jason Soroka, Dr. Steve Eisenberg.